today I'm just going to share with you a few ideas about really living a creative life, doing what you do until others think it's worthy of doing. And when you think about those two little words, you kind of go, well, how are you going to fill up your life? I've been kind of thinking quite lately, like, I love language. I always think, like, what would be your last word? What would you put on your headstone, your epitaph? Which led me to start looking at other creatives. And Peter Ustinov, the poet, when he was asked what he would like, his answer was this: keep off the grass. So I love that. It's sensitive, engaging, and incredibly simple. I'm thinking of this one, exit only. But I love ideas that are very simple, that communicate in the world in a great way. And I mean, Spike Milligan was one of those great creatives, comedians. This is his headstone. I presume none of you speak Gaelic, but we'll come back to that. You know, he lost his dog once, and he took an ad out in the paper, and he just put two words, and he just said, "Here, boy." And I love that, just a simple act to give the world a bit of a wobble. The other thing he did is that he was reading the newspaper and reading the obituary columns, and he said, "Oh, look, darling, everyone's died in alphabetical order again." And I suppose that's what it is. In Gaelic, this is, "I told them I was ill." So that is at the end. So a good place to start is letters of the alphabet. As a graphic designer, you sort of confront these kind of characters every day, but not often do we have the time or inclination to kind of pause momentarily and look into these 26 characters and kind of define how could they be? What actually makes up these horizontal, vertical, sometimes strokes into a unique character? And here's my attempt. So if you look at an A, it's really an H designed by an architect. Where a B has a figure and is working on it. C was separated from O and never healed. D has eaten too much. E is the cannibal with the fork. F, the victim. G swallowed its tongue. H raised the bar. I, the naturist. J, the naturist aroused. K shoots from the hip. L is flat-footed. M, the centerfold. N is a Z that never got out of bed. O likes to sing. P is top-heavy. Q likes to poke fun at O. R is the poser. S suffers from motion sickness. T is an eye that branched out. U is bent. V is split ends. W is ping pong. X is busting to relieve itself. Y gives you options. And Z sidesteps most situations. That's why there's not many words beginning with Z. Anyway, I love language, and that's our base material as graphic designers. Today I'm going to take you through a backstory, that my kind of a slight obsession with language and language systems. And it was really the rebranding of a major cultural institution, the Auckland Art Gallery, to Toyo Tamaki, which launched 2 years ago. And it was really our MoMA, our Tate. It won the World Architecture Prize. It's a beautiful building. It references the great aspects of the New Zealand landscape in the sense of canopies. But the thing is, today's presentation is not really about the building. It's more to do with the conversation that we had with the audience about trying to engage people with this concept of art. So what I want to share with you today is about two things. One about simplicity, and the other one about constraint. Now, simplicity is like taking something incredibly complex, like art, and simplifying it so it can connect with people. And constraint, not as a method to kind of stop the creative process, but a kind of governing system to actually work within. Now, take art. Just remember these three little letters for a little while. It's a small little word that can mean almost anything to anybody and nothing to everybody else. It is kind of complicated. It can stop party conversations. You've already heard the quote, my child could do that. So rather than get into philosophical debates about what art is and what it isn't, what it could be or what it shouldn't be, we will go with Ad Reinhardt's that art is art and everything else is simply everything else. So when you're confronted to brand the largest visual art experience and bring the story of New Zealand art to the people and make sure that everybody comes, it's a pretty tough thing. So the inquiry really came to looking at art and text. And these things go well together. Everyone knows the most famous thing that started really the conceptual art was this picture of Magritte. This is not a pipe. Of course it's not a pipe. Magritte once said, just trying to satisfy emotionally. Obviously you can't put tobacco in it. And then there was Apollinaire, who was one of the theorists of the Cubists with his shape poems, where this puts this emphasis on text as an image rather than, so looking rather than reading. And then you had this kind of cool conceptual art stuff, like originally stemmed from Gertrude Stein's poem, this kind of recursive statement she said, which was 5 words in a line, which is her shortest poem. And this is a Joseph Kossuth. And then you had Baldessari, who would actually make paintings about paintings, suggesting tips for artists to make other paintings. And I love this thing. Subject matter is important. It has been said that paintings with cows and hens in them collect dust, while the same paintings with bulls and roosters sell quite well. And there's Lawrence Weiner. A lot of my interest came from sculptors and sculptors' use of language, and they saw it as a material, and Lawrence Weiner was famous for that. Then we have Ian Hamilton Finlay with concrete poetry, in the sense of how the letters are placed and can give you access to the meaning of the word acrobats. And then Carl Andre was famous for just putting a row of bricks down, also really developed concrete poetry in the sense of using it, the typewriter as a tool, like the way a sculptor would use a lathe or a chisel. So the patterns that words make. And then, of course, Gomringa with concrete poetry, which says silence. Now, none of you have probably heard of the Oulipo group. If you have, that's awesome. This is pretty minor literature. I'm taking you into the dark deeps of minor literature movements. The Oulipo group are a group of people that use mathematics and methods. Rather than creating free verse, they use these constraints as a method to come. The most famous is Georges Perec, who wrote a novel called The Void, which didn't even include a single E in the whole novel. He had 4 E's in his name, so he must have been a bit paranoid about E's. But anyway, so they played with palindromes and anagrams and word games. Some of you may have heard of his book, Life, a User's Manual. What was interesting about this was about a fictitious apartment building. And he would drop the characters in the rooms. And then through this, he would create what's in a chess move called the Knight's Tour. And that would actually create the system to write the kind of novel. So you're actually creating structures and systems to kind of work within. Here's some of the systems. Now, we've been playing these games for centuries. One of these games is the word square, which we all know, where the horizontal and vertical readings of the words come together. And this has been happening since 79 AD, otherwise known as the sator or the rota square. Now, there's another form that we probably all learn at school called the acrostic, where you write the alphabet down and you actually write off it and actually use it as a way of starting something. Sometimes creativity is purely just about knowing when to start. This one is Lewis Carroll, who was also a mathematician that used mathematical systems to write words. Here we have Alice Pleasant Slidell running down the left-hand side. Now, we had this other form called a diastic, which is where you took a form. This is Jackson McLeod, who's one of the co-founders of the Fluxus art movement. And you take the word insects assassins and you would actually write through those 2 words. And then finally, a new form that happened in 1969 is mesostics. Mesostics was created by the musician-composer John Cage, the American composer. And what he did here was he'd take people's names and he would write through those names. But he would take a text like Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce and he would write through that to create long pieces of form. Now, just of interest, no one really thinks about letter frequency, how often something's used. Some of you may have heard of this word. It's a real word called Eton and Shootaloo. This is actually the original backspace, the original mistake. So when you were doing letterpress, the way that the letters were set up, if you'd made a mistake to the copywriter, you'd run your fingers down, it would spell Eton and Shootaloo, so they would actually know to replace that with the correct word. So it came from really old systems. Knowing that when we come back to those three letters, the word art, and looking at the word Eton and Shootaloo, you'll see that there's an E, there's an R, and a T in there. And I thought, that's quite useful. So looking at it, we have an A, which is the second most common vowel. We have R, which is the 8th most frequent letter and the 4th most used consonant. And we have T, the second most common letter and the most consonant in the English alphabet. So when you stack these three words, I was thought, can you take all that knowledge and systems around creating an identity that would start a conversation with an audience about the possibilities of what art is? So it became a very simple, it's a rule system, where it started with the indefinite article, A, followed by a word that must have an R with a T, which created like a word stack. The great thing about this is, could you create an identity system which was just a language game? We know that people like them because they like playing crosswords, which is a recent form, but we all do it. So we thought, rather than using images of design or images of art, which you said you hold up to people, is this that gave them access into the meaning of it. So if a 5-year-old could understand it, maybe a 90-year-old could too. So of course you have the normal guides, the graphic standards documents, which all graphic designers like to do to explain it, but this was more about explaining the system. Experimental Jet Set explained the other day, sometimes you create work that you actually have to step away from. So in a sense, we were designing ourselves out of a job and creating a system that other people could play with. The great thing about it is that you could make a general proposition about the possibilities of what art is. You could encourage people to take a curious visit. It could be a declarative sentence, i.e. this is a declarative sentence. You could instruct people to take a free poster. So art could be anything. It could ask a rhetorical question, encourage kids to engage in the learning centre, or a verbal instruction, take a gallery tour. Or if you get lost, I love this one, it has a right, left, and they perfectly match. I don't know, it's just, I love art, yeah. But you see, sometimes the art world has a fantastic language that surrounds it. It's incredibly codified, and people talk about relational aesthetics and postmodern condition. Well, that's kind of confusing for the everyday people who actually just want to engage in the beauty of art. So this whole idea is that it could also just be, art can be a great mate. The sort of language of the street, a sure thing, a universal truth, or just telling people that that's a framed picture on the wall. Just remind them if they want to come, tell them it's free. Now, Marcel Duchamp, difficult artist, some of you will know him, most of you will, renowned for also being a great chess player, mathematician, prankster, made a great work called The Large Glass. It's quite difficult work to get his hand on, so could the brand actually explain to people what it is? He's a French artist, a grandmaster chess player. He made some great works called A Standard Stoppage, and The Large Glass, which is a bride strip beer, a bachelor apparatus, and he was a true Dadaist. Now, everyone knows the famous work where he put the toilet in the gallery, and the artist's selection of the work made the work. So in this situation, I love this comment Duchamp said, the only difference between art and architecture was the plumbing. I love that. Anyway, to the side. But the act of selecting something from a Sears catalogue, which is a ready-made object, a urinal fountain, he gave it a personal signature, which is a pseudonym, A.R. Mutt, and he was a bit of a prankster. So this is what he called assisted ready-mades. Ready-mades which were given a title, so they shifted meaning. So we started to play this game. So you take the word of an umbrella, and you think about the context of an umbrella and the function of an umbrella. So it's not as easy. It looks kind of simple, but you'd have to use these to explain it. So if you're really into music, you'd call an umbrella a thunderstruck. Down the bottom, a temporary shelter, a religious motif. Rain is a vertical effect. Until you'd actually find one right down the bottom, which is called a pitter-patter, which would then link back to concrete and sound poetry. So when you lift it up, there's a personal joke. Art is everywhere. Of course, you could go and do a bit of retail therapy and buy yourself a red T-shirt if that's your thing, or a grey one if that's what you like, or one for the kids, or Michelle. Rockstar. So art could be a round button or a larger button, picture postcard, a printed matter, write little notes about a bigger picture, personal thought, a written note, a short sentence, a brief encounter, a yours truly, a Christmas present, a repeating pattern, which is a repeating pattern, a rubber that says a disappearing act, a colourful palette, and even a fire extinguisher. Because I love it sometimes you're in the Tate and people are just checking out that fire extinguisher and trying to look for the label, Anyway, so part of the system of creativity is creating rules that you kind of work within. And I have this thing called the IST list. And I've used it to kind of govern my life, And the IST list is a list of ISTs, because if you really want to do something important, have an occupation or something, you usually have an IST at the end of it. So if it's an activist, or an anarchist, or a dentist, or whatever, it's your vocation. So the goal with this IST list, which are kind of characters in my head, I don't have that many, maybe 7 real characters, the rest are made up, is take an IST from the list and make them look at something. And in this case, we want people to see art in everything. So here's a quick history lesson, is that for the pessimist, art is a boring painting. For the optimist, art is a real beauty. For the feminist, art is a fur teacup. For the botanist, art is a flower arrangement. The philanthropist, art is a starving artist. For the futurist, art is a silver bullet. For the modernist, art is a grid system. For, what's that one? Capitalists, art is a great investment. For the impressionist, art is a brushstroke. For the atheist, art is a creation myth. For the naturist, art is a birthday suit. For the sexist, art is a perfect 10. For the cubist, art is a different perspective. For the alchemist, art is, I don't know if you know this, Pierre Manzini, he actually shat in a can, because everything that an artist does and produces is art, so this was his work. This is a personal output. For the illusionist, art is a conjuring trick. For the conceptualist, art is a dictionary definition. And for the tourist, art is a return ticket. And for the vacationist, an art is a nearly there. For the cartoonist, art is a cartoon strip. For the terrorist, art is a power tripper. For the urbanist, art is a grocery list. For the optometrist, art is a moire effect. For the surrealist, art is a recurring nightmare. And for the exhibitionist, art is a porn star. And for the fatalist, art is a parting shot. We got to rebrand our national opera company just last year. And so again, you use these base materials, so you know a little bit about O now. And so you look about just applying these to create a musical form for a logo mark. Very simple device based on notation. And looking for the simple idea of launching Madame Butterfly. Has anyone seen Madame Butterfly? Well, basically people sing, someone dies, And it's set with a geisha girl in Japan after the war. So you work with what you know, and you work with what people want to know. So I know about a Japanese flag, and then you just combine those things to tell a simple story. And then it just applies to everything, and then it comes right back to the concept of the flag. So the idea of just picking up a motif and running with it and trying to unpick the story, but trying to tell the story in a simple thing is like La Traviata by Verdi. Life, death, silence. I would try and sing that note, but I shouldn't. I'd get that type of effect. This is a job for theatre, and theatre is usually to do with just presenting yourself as a person to an audience. And we got a chance to rebrand our most avant-garde kind of theatre company called Silo, S-I-L-O. And most people would know that actors, the whole idea of acting is about expression. So the universal signifier for theatre is the comedy and tragedy mask, the happy and sad faces. Knowing that was just applied to a new type of logo form, which is just silo. So here you have an S for a wink, an I for an eye, an L, the bridge for a nose, and an O. That is a sort of an emoticon of shock. They said that we weren't allowed to use the actors, and I've got a thing for holes. So I thought, well, okay, we'll only show parts of you. So each season we create a series of images, and they're quite awkward to art direct because you cut the holes and there's people on the other side doing all sorts of things. But again, become little narratives about these kind of doing physical collage rather than using scissors and telling stories like tribes. And this next season up, we thought, well, we'll move from animals to humans to animals, rabbits, a famous play called White Rabbit, Red Rabbit, which you must see in your lifetime. The tiki form, which is unique to New Zealand, called hui. And this one, which I apologise for, it was a musical comedy, slightly awkward, so that was a wrong note. Sorry about that. I get a chance to sort of express New Zealand culture in different ways, and this is a job to kind of really sell New Zealand music. And when you think about New Zealand, all we've got is birds. Of course, there's sheep that help you through the difficult teenage years, but that's another thing. I trained as a sculptor, so this is really a chance to kind of create work and imagery and share it with the world. So this is really a story of a bird that has a nest, that cracks an egg, that floats away, and then dies. It's the circle of life. So I just like playing with objects that are kind of surreal, tell stories. And the tui bird is New Zealand's most unique bird. A tui can mimic a cell phone, and they have two white fluffs. So this one's like a pet tui that people used to keep, and they can talk and train. I love holes. I go back to them quite often. This is an untitled hole. This is a detail of an untitled hole. This is an italic hole. This is a startled hole. So this is an ongoing session. This is just games that you kind of play. Up next, I've got pie hole, fire in the hole, and a hole, and I'll leave that up to your imagination. My mother always said that someone else said, because if you can't remember who said it, you always said your mother said it, was that if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. And this one, you can easily get yourself out. This scans all the world for all the tweets that they do, and it looks for single words. And it actually looks for the word fart. And then it will search that word, and it will send a sound to a speaker that will push a perfect smoke ring out of its bunghole. I like how things say what they do, and they kind of instruct you to explain. This is a speech bubble, which is a speech bubble. I love how it says everything and nothing at the same time. I love how this one says it a little bit louder. I love how when you go to a party and say the wrong thing, the conversation just hits the floor. This is a light, a torch, it always has its light on. This is a coat hanger. This is a coat hanger upside down. These are the keys of the car. You guys all do this? This is a poster that's metal, and it's quite heavy, and it's got one single hole in it, and when you hang it, it just does what it does. These are bottles. I love bottles. I always return to really simple things. It's like, what do we know about a bottle? This archetypal form. And when you change the material, the bottle becomes a rolling pin, and therefore it becomes a candle and claps until kind of one. 2009 was a tough year for us, so I manufactured 500 of these sort of drunk bottles for my clients. So just looking at it makes you feel drunk. Chocolate keyboard, because it just looks yummy. And eggnog. I don't know if any of you tasted eggnog, but just making a brand that has no text. It's just something that looks like an egg. And when you look in it just at the top looks like an egg. I really love brooms. I could have talked an hour on brooms, but I won't. But brooms, they're very simple things, you know. So this is a shepherd's broom. It's kind of got like an end that pushes and an end that pulls, you know, so push-pull. This broom is very simple, just a little device somewhere to hang your shirt or your coat when you're finished. This is oh God, what the hell is that? This is a Pinocchio broom. And Pinocchio, as you all know, the more that he lied, the longer it got. So he was a wooden puppet, of course. So this is his unconfessed. He goes, I'm a boy, I'm a broom, I'm a man. But anyway, and of course when you left the room, copulating brooms, Pinocchio goes for it, doesn't he? This is a coffee table broom. It cleans up after itself. Now I'm going to end with a novel. I always wanted to write a novel. Now, I'm going to have a go. It might be a bit melancholic, so I'm just going to walk you through. Really, it's about a trade-off, about creating about life, really, about the trade-offs that you make over this, over that. So it's really another wordplay about 3 words, mind, 2 words with 1 implied with the word over. Now, let's begin. Turn over page. I met this lovely woman once. I'd fallen head over heels for her. We spent a lot of time hanging out, going over time. With her hair over our eyes, we had a talk over lunch about something overheard. Her lipstick was overdone. She had this sort of way of colouring outside over the lines. She had a hold over me. I ordered chicken, which was overcooked. I went to pour over the gravy, and a large overbite, I spilled it all over my shirt. The meal was very overpriced, and we started to quarrel over money. I was in overdraft, and her credit was over limit. So she says, don't overact. And I was like, fuck you, I'm so over you. I had a few drinks, of course, and so I left in my fucking car, and I was driving, and I sort of swerve a bit, and I cross over the line, and I hear this, doo, whoa. I pull over, sir, and I was like, shit. And I wound down my window, I said, cow over moon. And he goes, Jesus Christ, mate, you got a drug overdose, haven't you? So hand over heart, I had my judgment overruled, my day in court, and I pulled the wool over their eyes, and my conviction was overturned. Very happy, I decided to start again, turn over a new leaf, find a new thing, and I got a job as a voiceover artist. That thing where you talk over you with an all-over effect. I worked total overload, and I paid overtime, sure, nice. But, I went to the boss and I said, fuck, I'm overworked. And he was like, which was probably a step over the mark. And then he said, get over it. In a rude overtone, I was like, gross oversight. I was fucking fired over nothing. Once over again. I had to gloss over everything, startups. I needed something overseen. I needed to start again, find that thing, that thing that was going to make me sometimes overlooked that no one else sees. So I found it. It's fucking over here. It's over here. So I decided I got it. I won't tell you what it is. But I decided to take over the world, and I put a sign over the door, and I was making money hand over a fist, and I was all over everything, honestly, working overtime, which is a gross overstatement, but there's cash overflow, and then all of a sudden there was a budget overrun, and invoice overdue, and that's just business. People will just walk over you. And so here's a brief overview. This guy walks in with a takeover bid, and he says, think over it. I was like, shit, I'll mull over it a bit. He said, don't overthink. I said, sweet as. I said, all over, I'm fucking out of here. So I celebrated it. I had lots of drinking. I drank over limit because I didn't read the instructions on the bottle that said don't overfill. Hand over mouth, of course, again. Head over bowl. Ooh, shit. I had to rush down and get some drugs over the counter for my hangover cure. So that's just water over dams, so a big fuss over nothing. So I went home and had some leftover dinner. I shoved in the microwave and was steak overdone. And old girlfriend calls. She says, talk over the phone. And And she just bloody rakes me over the coals. And I was just like, she said, come over here. Come overseas. I was like, oh, sweet ass. This is long overdue. See somewhere new. Cloud overhead. I put on my black overcoat. And I was just walking over a bridge. And then there was a fire overhead. Bang! And this guy comes up to me and says, hand over money. I was like, shit, I had to start all over again. Here I guess this is life. So anyway, the good things is I had my camera. There's a nice sunset over the water, and I took a photo, slightly overexposed. I know this is overkill, but we're almost over now. Just bear with me. So I decided to move over there and play over again. I had to pull out all my tricks, the walk over water trick, to win over her. But anyway, we hooked up, and I got a roof over my head, and I finally had someone to watch over me. It was special. And then a baby came along, which was overdue, and it just bloody cried over milk. And I was sitting there reading kind of weird books about jumping over moons. And anyway, I'd wake up in the morning, trip over toys, and all I wanted was my eggs over easy. I didn't sign up for this, just want to read over the paper. So anyway, rain overhead, I pull over my jumper, off to work, shoes over socks, and I back out the car and I run over the bloody dog. And I went, roll over, boy. And then, boom, he jumped up. Victory over death. Fantastic. So I was stressed over everything. She was very overbearing. She was too overzealous. It's just bridge over water. I mean, she said, game over, baby. And I was like, she said, sign over rights. I was like, what the... My account was overdrawn, and I was just like, shit, this is all over soon. And I said, man, baby, I'm not over you. And she said, oh, well, I'm almost over now. And so we had a chat over coffee, and man overboard, I was chosen over another. That's life over 40. Fuck it, you get all over itch and sort of touch overweight. You need a total engine overhaul, of course. You come over here and you go back out of there because I'm not over yet, man. I'm bigger than 40. And so I spot the neighbour and I jump over the fence and I stay overnight, and she was kind of a little overactive and left right over left and left over right, and Jesus Christ, it was all over again. And I'm over it, or all over it, so over it. Thank you very much. Now I'll just leave one thing. Going right back to Spike Milligan, all I ask of you today is this kind of freaky. When you're standing up here, there's all these eyeballs just looking at you. So we have a saying in the studio that if you can't see something, you've got buttons for eyes. Like a toy, button for eyes. So I just want you to go out there, just please, and give the world a bit of a wobble. Find your little thing, a little gesture that makes a smile and, messes with someone's head. So these are buttons. You'll see I've got a couple here. You've probably been noticing there. And just wear them. Take these two little buttons for me. They'll be at the end. And next time you're at the picture theatre, when the lights dim and the movie starts, just pop a couple on your hoodie. Thank you very much.